Si auparavant vous craigniez Google, Meta ou Apple, vous avez maintenant de quoi trembler avec Super Elon. Nous allons analyser les pièces de son puzzle et découvrir la finalité de ce gigantesque mécano. La partie la plus visible de cet empire est sans conteste Tesla, la voiture électrique qui a vocation à devenir autonome. Son succès abrite un projet beaucoup plus vaste, la robotique avec Optimus. Musk promet un avenir peuplé par plus de robots que d'êtres humains. Des robots pour accomplir les principales tâches de la vie quotidienne.
Be a teacher, babysit your kids, it can walk your dog, mow your lawn, get the groceries, just be your friend, serve drinks.
Le financement est la pierre angulaire de ces projets. C'est Starlink, l'accès mondial par satellite à l'Internet rapide pour toutes les zones blanches.
Car le juteux marché du haut débit via l'espace attire de plus en plus de monde et les projets de constellation se multiplient.
Il prévoit un revenu de 25 milliards par an. C'est un concept global. Il construit les lanceurs, qui sont en partie financés par les vols de la NASA. Il construit en masse des petits satellites basse orbite à coût réduit. Il procède au lancement des fusées SpaceX, déploie ses propres satellites et gère les abonnements en direct. Vient ensuite l'énergie. Sa stratégie s'appuie sur l'échelle de Kardashev qui mesure le développement des sociétés à travers l'utilisation de l'énergie, d'abord sur Terre, puis stellaire. Musk parie sur le solaire, rien que le solaire, une énergie gratuite et sans limite. Pour y parvenir, il s'est appuyé au départ sur une de ses sociétés les moins connues, Solar City, pour la fabrication des toits solaires d'abord pour ses usines, puis à la revente et à la production d'électricité. Ce projet performant vise à produire une électricité moins chère et qui servira aussi à alimenter les batteries.
Compared to solar panels, Solar Roof, which has better insulation and durability, as well as its more aesthetic appearance, is one of the projects developed by Tesla to make electricity production from solar energy more common in homes.
Une autre société très connue qu'il a rachetée à grand bruit, Twitter, devenu X, sert à la fois à marquer son empreinte sur l'opinion et surtout à intégrer toutes les interactions des abonnés comme source de connaissances pour alimenter sa propre IA, XAI.
Elon Musk and his XAI startup have built the largest and most powerful artificial intelligence training supercomputer in the world. Elon has named this beast Colossus. It is equipped with the latest NVIDIA GPU hardware, it's liquid-cooled with vast amounts of water, and is powered by giant Tesla Megapack batteries. Elon believes that all of this combined will create the world's most powerful artificial intelligence, one that will literally solve the mysteries of the universe.
Après ces élections qui ont vu le triomphe de Trump, il devrait prendre les rênes de la privatisation de l'État américain dans une pure vision libertarienne du Make America Great Again, le MAGA, moins d'État, plus de puissance.
On attend la confirmation, mais à la tête d'une commission gouvernementale chargée de mener un audit complet en termes financiers et de performance sur la totalité du gouvernement fédéral.
Il sera en charge aussi pour déréguler l'IA et les entraves qu'il rencontre pour mener à bien ses propres projets. Car le projet final d'Elon Musk est la clusterisation des États avec la privatisation de tous les services par des giga-entreprises privées.
A number of national leaders, corporate financial leaders from the Middle East here. What's your advice to decision makers here in the room that don't want to miss the AI transformation and will be part of the leadership of that AI transformation? Do they need to build their own clusters here? Are they partnering?
Yeah, I think there's probably all countries will have their own AI clusters over time. It's currently very difficult to actually build an AI cluster and have it run. It's not like just pulling a computer out of a box. They are currently very difficult to run. And you have to say, are you going to be training a frontier model? Because if you're training a frontier model, then you need a massive amount of compute and a level of technical skill that is only a few companies possess. So But over time, I think every country will have AI compute clusters. It's just going to be a normal thing that every country has. So, yeah.
Un monde envahi de robots, encadré par l'intelligence artificielle, le transhumanisme et la conquête spatiale de l'univers. Bienvenue dans l'univers futuriste d'Elon Musk. Je vais maintenant, à partir de sources récentes fiables, à base d'interviews, de reportages, d'événements de la galaxie Musk, vous dévoiler tous ces programmes qui, mis bout à bout, laissent entrevoir le projet d'un visionnaire. Regardez jusqu'au bout, c'est peut-être la vision de notre avenir qui va se dérouler sous nos yeux. Pour commencer, on ne peut pas comprendre Elon Musk si on ne commence pas par étudier ses positions sur l'éducation et la formation.
He didn't think regular schools were doing a good enough job of preparing kids. He's a big proponent of teaching people to think based on first principles, which is figuring out how things work by boiling them down to the basics. For example, it used to be that people thought a radical improvement in rocketry was impossible. Space agencies and private companies tried to build reusable rockets, but failed. The only one that kind of worked was NASA's space shuttle. But the cost of refurbishing the boosters by fishing them out of the ocean was so great that it didn't make sense.
You look at what others are doing, say, well, others didn't make it work, so therefore it doesn't work. But that has no basis in reality. A first principles or foundational approach would be to say, let's look at the physics and economics of a rocket and say, if we analyze the physics of the rocket, is it physically possible?
Ad Astra School originally began out of SpaceX's rocket factory in Hawthorne, California, to teach Elon's children and the kids of some employees. The teacher who helped create the curriculum was Josh Don.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Cindy.
Don taught one of Elon's sons at a private school for gifted children in LA. The SpaceX CEO then approached him to start an experimental school at his rocket factory.
So if Elon's directive was to make it great, then, okay, well, what does great look like?
It looked like a totally different experience than a typical school. Instead of classes in languages, music, or sports, kids focused on critical thinking, solving the types of problems SpaceX employees tackle. The lesson of first principles is to not be bound by what's already been done. There were also questions related to Tesla, as students had exposure to Tesla's design studio within SpaceX's Hawthorne factory. For example,
like, what could the supercharger network look like in a country where it doesn't yet exist?
What Josh was looking for was the ability to reason. Centering superchargers around dense populations is a start.
And then the next question is like, well, where do we go next? And the way that they reason through that is really interesting, because then they're seeing these like multiple pathways that they could approach.
And this is high-level thinking at a really young age.
It's remarkable what kids are capable of when you give them opportunities where they have decisions to make.
Josh now runs Synthesis, an online program applying the same type of thinking at Elon's school.
Oh my gosh, this is the best place for tech.
Oh, we're going really fast.
Yes.
Students from around the world strategize in teams as a way to mirror collaboration in real life.
Have fun. We'll start the first game in about 5 minutes.
Although the students are as young as 8, the problems they have to answer are difficult even for adults. For example, imagine that rocket travel is as normal as plane travel. If you had to choose one future, which would it be? Traveling to anywhere on Earth within an hour, going sightseeing on the moon, or 3, starting a city on Mars. Again, there's no right or wrong answer.
But the idea is to start wondering, like, well, which will come first and which one will change human life on here on Earth most?
It's about figuring out what the future will look like and then building that future. Elon is reimagining the future of education. Although his original private school is no longer running, he's opened up another Ad Astra school at SpaceX's Starbase in Texas with a few dozen students. Will this type of education produce the next great entrepreneur? There are many ways to learn that can be more effective than sitting in a classroom.
Elon Musk, lors de la conférence Tesla 2024, a présenté une flotte de 50 véhicules autonomes et coordonnés entre eux.
So, in fact, I think the cost of autonomous transport will be so low that you can think of it like individualized mass transit. The average cost of a bus per mile for a city, not the ticket price because that is subsidized, but the average price is about $1 a mile. Whereas the cost of cybercab, we think probably over time, from the operating cost is probably going to be around 20 cents a mile. And price, including taxes and everything else, probably ends up being 30 or 40 cents a mile. So yes, and you will be able to buy one. Like, let's say somebody is an Uber or Lyft driver today, where they can actually sort of manage a fleet of cars, and sort of manage, I don't know, 10, 20 cars, and just sort of take care of them like a shepherd tends their flock. You have your flock of cars, and you're the shepherd, and you take care of your flock of cars. I think that would be pretty cool.
Il s'appuie sur le retour d'expérience des millions de Tesla en circulation pour analyser toutes les situations vécues, qu'une seule personne ne pourra jamais rencontrer dans sa vie entière. Il annonce aussi le développement de la recharge par induction avec le robot-taxi qui n'aura pas de prise de recharge. Cela se fera en passant au-dessus d'un chargeur à induction.
It's the same techniques. It's just a robot with arms and legs instead of a robot with wheels. And we've made a lot of progress with Optimus. And as you can see, we started up with someone in a robot suit, sort of down, and then we've progressed dramatically year after year. So if you extrapolate this, you're really going to have something spectacular, something that anyone could own. So you could have your own personal R2-D2 C-3PO. But fundamentally, at scale, the Optimus robot, you should be able to buy an Optimus robot for, I think, probably $20,000 to $30,000 long term. So, and what can it do? It'll basically do anything you want. So it can be a teacher, babysit your kids. It can walk your dog, mow your lawn, get the groceries, just be your friend, serve drinks. Whatever you can think of, it will do. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I think this will be the biggest product ever of any kind. Because I think everyone, of the 8 billion people of Earth, I think everyone's going to want their Optimus buddy. And there's going to be maybe two. And then they'll be producing products and services. I predict, actually, provided we address risks of digital superintelligence, 80% probability of good, a good outcome. Look on the bright side. The cup is 80% full. The cost of products and services will decline dramatically, and basically anyone will be able to have any products and services they want. It will be an age of abundance, the likes of which people have almost no one has envisioned. It will be something special.
Et pour finir cet aperçu de l'univers d'Elon Musk, voici le domaine le plus controversé, l'implant cérébral Neuralink, pour atteindre à terme le transhumanisme, puis l'immortalité choisie. Nous suivons ici Elon Musk lors de la conférence CNS 2024, le congrès annuel des neurochirurgiens.
Well, this is going to sound somewhat esoteric and maybe a bit strange, but I was actually trying to figure out how to mitigate the risk of digital superintelligence. And I mean, to the degree that we can improve our bandwidth to our digital tertiary self, I think we can better align artificial intelligence with a collective human will. Like I said, this is going to sound very strange, but so you can think of like basically our intelligence is being divided into roughly 3 areas. There's sort of like a limbic system, like the sort of instinctual elements, the sort of like the cortex and the planning part. But then we also have a tertiary layer, which is all the computers and phones, applications, software that we use. So that you have a digital tertiary self. Basically, we're already an android, effectively. And in fact, I think people feel this when they forget their phone. Forgetting your phone, leaving your phone behind is like having missing limb syndrome. You're missing your part of your digital tertiary element. The constraint on human-machine symbiosis is, however, is bandwidth. What is especially output bandwidth? The output bandwidth of a human is less than 1 bit per second over the course of a day. So if you have 86,400 seconds in a day, the number of output bits that you produce, I mean, maybe there's some rare cases where it's above 1 bit per second, but very few people produce 86,400 output bits of that's a rare situation. So most people are averaging less than 1 bit per second over a 24-hour period. And when we do speak, they say the number of symbols per second of speech or typing is quite low, especially if it's going through a phone. Then you just sort of have two slow-moving meat sticks that are trying to type letters on a phone. So you really have just a few, taps per second of characters. So your phone is like sitting there, and your phone is like a supercomputer in your hands, and it is desperately trying to figure out what you want to say.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I've personally experienced that phantom limb syndrome when I actually can't find my phone, and I hadn't thought of myself as a cyborg till you challenged me to think that way. But you're in a room of folks who've devoted their lives to neurologic disease, and I must confess to you that I had never actually thought of the output of the brain in terms of bits per second. But when you frame it that way, it makes it really clear why there may be a broader opportunity to make that virtual cyborg that we have now with our phone a little bit more efficient. So that's, as a starting point, what prompted your interest in Neuralink.
Yeah, so basically I thought, okay, if we're going to have, in order to have better human AI symbiosis, we must solve the bandwidth problem. Below a certain bandwidth, we are basically just stationary to a computer. And at 1 bit per second, that's a very low data rate when computers are doing trillions of bits per second.
So when you think about brain-machine interface, why did you select the technical approach you did? I know a lot of thought's gone into that.
Yeah, so, well, if you say like, okay, we need to have ultimately 1 million bits per second or a billion bits per second, gigabit per second interface, then that means you really can't you need an implant. And ultimately we'll need to replace like the skull, and it's going to be a zillion wire. I mean, this is some sci-fi, bizarre sci-fi stuff, and I'm not. This is certainly optional, hopefully.
That's good. Mandatory replacement of my skull would have been a problem.
Mandatory chip and brain is not what we're saying here for sure. But at a certain point, you say like, okay, how many electrodes are needed in order to interface have a whole brain interface?
Yeah, I've heard you mention that larger goal of whole brain interface. But one thing that's really struck me by the approach that's been taken is, I think as neurosurgeons, we often contemplate the natural history of the disease and competing risk and benefit. And Neuralink, as a company, has started with folks who have ALS and spinal cord injury. Yeah. These kind of first steps in terms of technical approach. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So long-term goal, like I said, is mitigating civilizational risk associated with a divergence of biological and digital intelligence. That's the long-term goal. Obviously, then you got to parse that into like, well, what are we going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
So the starting point with the first Neuralink device is 1,000 electrodes. And we've with just 100, if only 100 of those electrodes are active, if you take, say, our first few patients, you know, we are setting world records. Admittedly, these are world records that are pretty low, but we're getting you know, around 10 bits per second, and there's a path to, you know, 1,000 bits per second, which would be literally 100 times more than the next record. So we want to do the implants in where there's the highest gain and the least risk. So that's so we call the first implant telepathy, which really just it's interfacing with the motor cortex, and you know, and it's basically looking at signals as though somebody moved their arm, and just reading that signal and then sending that signal to the patient's phone or computer, so they can then move the cursor around just by thinking. I think with our second generation device, which will have 3,000 electrodes, and we'll get a lot better at placing those electrodes. So I think we'll have, you know, for our first device, in the first patient we had like a 10%, roughly 10% yield. So it's only 100 electrodes being effective. So we'll both improve the yield and we'll increase the number of electrodes. So we'll go from, say, 100 electrodes that are reading to, I don't know, out of 3,000 electrodes, maybe 15.5, so like 1,500 are reading. So at that point, the data rate is far in excess of what someone playing a video game with their hands could do.
You know, one of the things that struck me in terms of the technical approach is obviously you have the implant and then you're extracting those signals and have a recording algorithm, and then you're actually affecting an action. And, you know, in one of the patients, you actually had a lead retraction, but then we're able to tune the recording algorithm to actually recover that function. And could you maybe say a little bit about that kind of vertically integrated approach and how that's going to let you scale a little bit?
Sure. Well, since, you know, really none of this stuff existed before, we had to design and build everything from scratch. And I mean, the device, it's basically like having like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit that replaces a piece of skull, and you've got these electrodes, very, very fine electrodes that are implanted with a surgical robot. And we don't know how to ultimately get to say, how do we do 1 million electrodes? We don't know how to do that yet, except that hopefully it is physically possible. If you want to have a high bandwidth whole brain interface, then I think probably the right order of magnitude is something like 1 million electrodes. And that still has a very high ratio of neurons to electrodes. So that means you've got to read, you know, we try to, like any given electrode has to be able to read neurons from, you know, several, like I don't know, 100 or 1,000 neurons. So if you've got 1 million electrodes and they can do, and each electrode can read 1,000 neurons, so you've got access to 1 billion neurons. Just still not that high, actually.
Yeah.
But hopefully high enough.
Well, I know the goal with a whole brain interface is this potential for long-term augmentation or symbiosis. But, you know, in the more immediate term, something that we think a lot about as surgeons is how is technology going to allow us to treat problems that we aren't able to treat now? And there's this whole family of diseases, psychiatric conditions, neurodevelopmental conditions, you know, folks who are neurodiverse, and neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's. And so as we get a better picture of not just the structure of the brain, but, you know, for lack of a better term, the music of the brain, do you see those as intermediate steps? Would love to hear your perspective on it.
I mean, I think we should be able to solve any problem over time that is a result of, you know, like if you think of the brain like a computer, effectively, like a circuit board or something like that, you can say, like, if you were given a circuit board and there were some short circuits or some circuits that should be there but aren't there, if there's any missing, if there are any circuits that shouldn't be there, and some that are there but shouldn't, we can fix those. So basically, it's kind of like fixing a circuit board. Now, if the circuit board's all melted, okay, it's going to be hard to fix a melted circuit board. You can fix the circuit board with a few issues, but you can't fix it if it's been melted. But the vast majority of diseases or issues, brain issues, I think are fixable with a Neuralink device. It's a fine-grained means of reading and writing electrical signals in the brain at a very with high precision, and so that means like if there's, say, an electrical storm, some kind of epilepsy or something, you can interrupt that storm. You can, there's like, if you can say, like, if there are a set of signals to read, like in the case of blindness, if somebody's lost their optic nerve or both eyes, you can still stimulate the visual cortex, even if they lost both eyes so basically anything that is a function of signals in or out if that is the nature of the problem, it can be fixed ultimately with a Neuralink device.
And so when
Absolutely.
I think of people with neurodiverse conditions, I always think that they have all of this amazing potential to potentially be unlocked, and maybe this implant could be a digital bridge to that. Absolutely.
So I think it can help a lot of people, like really ultimately help tens of millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people. I should say also there's potential going beyond the brain to, like, if somebody's got a sort of a spinal cord injury, that being able to transmit the signals. So, like the ideal, I think what, most people that have lost the connection between their brain and their body would like is to reanimate their body.
Sure.
There are some approximations of that where you can animate, say, a robot suit or a robot arm or something like that. But I think most people, if you ask them, like, what would you prefer? Oh, I'd like my body to work again.
Sure.
So that, if provided the neurons are still kind of there, it's certainly physically possible to shunt the signals from the motor cortex past the point where the damage has occurred to the neurons that then interface with your muscles and your arms and legs. If you think of it just like an electrical and communication system, like if you severed like some Ethernet cables, what would you do? Well, you'd bridge the signal. Okay, great. The same thing can be done with the human body. Bridge the electrical signals and the communication signals. So you've got sensors and actuators, and the signals, the bidirectional signals for sensors and actuators are being interrupted. And so if you shunt the signals, you will be able to reanimate the body.
So we've talked about the robot addressing the workforce problem. We've talked about scalability and interchangeability. A lot of what your vision involves is being high performing, but also affordable, so it'd be accessible to people. How do you see bridging that gap?
Yeah, so the device itself in volume should not be super expensive. I mean, hopefully it's like, I don't know, $5,000 to $10,000. And very high volume, it should start to approximate the cost of an Apple Watch or a phone. So maybe it's $1,000 or $2,000, something like that. And then if it's implanted with a robot, then that surgical procedure should be fast. Like we do have a game plan for what I call the 600-second surgery. So 10 minutes, you sit in the chair, and 10 minutes later you have an implant. 600 seconds. And we're not violating physics. If you break it down second by second, it is possible to have a 600-second or 10-minute surgery. And so at that point, if it's being done by a robot and the whole thing takes 10 minutes, I think it probably, the whole thing, all inclusive, ends up being, on the order of $5,000 maybe, similar to LASIK. I mean, we definitely are venturing into deep sci-fi here. If people are interested in some sci-fi book recommendations, I would recommend Ian Banks, the culture books. And Ian Banks actually does have this concept of a neural lace, where there's all the humans have like a neural, sort of a kind of a neural link or neural lace throughout their brain. And so, if somebody dies, their memories are being dynamically uploaded to the cloud or whatever the internet is in the future, and they can reinstantiate into a human body if they want. Or they can live in simulation, which we might be in right now. If so, I'd just like to applaud the simulators on the excellent work they are doing.
Yeah, this feels very immersive and high fidelity, so thank you to our simulator overloads. You know? Yeah, I appreciate the experience. So,
thank you, simulators. Please don't turn us off.
Yeah.
Elon Musk finit son interview en exposant sa vision du futur de l'humanité dans un monde anarchiste, sans propriété ni gouvernement, exempt de maladies, où l'on choisit la date de sa mort à l'aune de la science-fiction version Ian Banks avec la série La Culture. Dans cette vidéo, j'ai voulu vous faire découvrir l'univers et le personnage fantasque d'Elon Musk. Souvent, on ne voit qu'une partie du personnage, qu'une partie de ses réalisations. Ce manque de globalité ne permet pas de comprendre Elon Musk à sa juste valeur dans son intégralité, et il est plus facile de vouloir le catégoriser. En regardant tous les aspects de ses activités qui vont de l'éducation au transhumanisme, de la voiture électrique à la conquête de Mars, de la robotisation aux implants neuronaux, on comprend mieux son discours, son choix de soutenir Trump, son opposition au développement rapide et incontrôlé des langages d'intelligence artificielle, son libertarisme et son refus du wokisme et du politiquement correct. On peut aimer ou détester, on peut surtout ne pas être d'accord avec sa vision du monde, sa mégalomanie, ses projets. Mais on est obligé de reconnaître son génie, sa faculté hors du commun à prédire, puis à réaliser ses prédictions, même les plus folles, même seul contre tous. J'espère qu'avec cette vidéo, vous avez découvert, en plus de la complexité d'Elon Musk, des aspects de la révolution technologique que l'on pensait, il y a quelques années encore, tout droit sorti d'un roman de science-fiction. Cette révolution en cours, IA, robots, transplants, va marquer notre quotidien pour le meilleur ou pour le pire. Si ce format et ce genre de thème de vidéo vous ont plu, faites-le moi savoir dans les commentaires. Abonnez-vous, cela permet d'augmenter ma visibilité et aussi de vous tenir informé de la parution de mes prochaines vidéos. Vous pouvez aussi bien sûr liker et vous inscrire en dessous de la vidéo à ma liste pour vous abonner à ma future newsletter que je suis en train de mettre en place. Merci et à très bientôt.